Hey guys, what is up? It's Hunter Bick with DragTheBar.com, and welcome back to part 3 of my match with Barney Boatman. Just to recap the last video a little bit, he won a pretty big pot off me where he triple barreled and I folded on the river after he had been 3-betting. He had not really triple barreled me much in this match, and he definitely had not full potted the river before. So that was definitely a hand I gave him some credit for, and I folded on the river, and that has brought our stacks a little closer together than they had been. And he also is still check raising me really wide. He's moved some of his check raises to the turn after I started checking back flops, and he has called all of my flop 3-bets so far when I 3-bet him over a check raise. So he's starting to get a little more aggressive, and he's starting to fight back a little bit. So we're going to talk about some of the adjustments I'm going to make there. In the last video, I started to check back the flop a little bit, and I tried 3-betting him. That wasn't very successful. So we may need to just tighten up a little bit on the button. Probably not too much, but that would be one option. I'm not really that interested in starting to limp the button, but I think I may experiment with it a little bit in this video. But because it's pot limit and he can't 3-bet me to whatever he wants, I think a min raise is just superior to limping. Okay, so this is a spot where I expect to get check raised because Barney Boatman loves to check raise pair boards. So I just checked back with my Jack 8, and even though he's been moving a lot of his check raises to the turn after I do this, I still decide to fire just because the board is so dry. But I do get check raised, so that's okay. I'm not gonna fight back right here, but I think I can just fold and add this to the sample size of which he has been he's check raised the turn on me. I am gonna try to. Well, I'm not sure how successful I was in the last video considering its length, but I am going to continue to make an effort to keep my explanations on the shorter side. And if you guys think I leave anything out, just post it in the forums, and I'll be sure to get to it. But I'm trying to keep these videos in a watchable length. So here's a spot where I'm just he doesn't give me a lot of credit when I check raise him, and I really don't like attacking those paired ace boards because it's kind of an obvious bluff spot. So, and a lot of people just won't give you credit for it, and they'll call you down with any pair. They have a lot of aces in their range too, so you're never going to fold any of those. And it's just not a spot I've had a lot of success trying to bluff in the past. So I kind of just prefer to actually have an ace there, and then I go nuts with it to make it look like I'm bluffing. But depending on the opponent, I don't expect Barney in this match to give me any credit. So I threw out my ace jack, pretty standard. And on this king jack 2 board, I think that I have a couple options. I can c-bet, and I think he's just gonna he folds still 60% of my c-bets after I 3-bet. Excuse me, no, 80%. That's a huge number. So on a board like this, I feel like I'm only getting action from like a king because he doesn't really float me, and he wouldn't call here with like 8s. He's not making like light calls after I 3-bet. So I decided to just check it to him, maybe give him a chance to bluff, maybe give him a chance to maybe value bet a worse hand. I also have not checked many of these at all, so I think that might happen. But I think if I bet, I think he's just really only going to call with something better, maybe a few worse jacks, but that would pretty much be it. So I really prefer a check on that flop. And I checked the turn mostly for the same reason. I think if I lead the turn, he could call me with like a queen. But again, how many of those are really in his range at this point? I mean, I guess there's some, considering how I played the flop. But so the king shows up on the river, and now I definitely need to bet for value. I think that there's no way he has a king he would have betted on the turn, and I don't think he's ever going to bluff at this again, especially when I check called this board, and it's all Broadway, hits my 3-bet range really hard. So I just need to bet something, and I'm trying to make it look consistent with my bluff size. which is usually 2/3 to 3/4, and he just turbo folds. That's really all I can do there is just kind of hope that he has something because he's never gonna bluff at it. So it's not a spot I'm often gonna make any much money, but we do need to bet because we have the best hand such an overwhelming percent of the time. So he 3 bets me, like always. Well, like 18.8% of the time. Feels like always. And I board is super dry. And this is exactly the sort of spot I've been floating him in the entire match. If you look at the second last row of stats, the second one is fold versus flop C bet in a 3-bet pot. And I'm only folding to 25% of his 3 bets in this spot. So, I mean, I've just been floating him like crazy. And this is a spot I'm just going to do it again. I mean, it's just so... We know what his range is, and it's so light. Excuse me, it's so wide with all the suited connectors and, you know, pocket pairs and everything. So I was planning on bluffing the turn, but then I turned some showdown value. And I have the best hand a lot, and I really don't expect betting to get me a whole lot of value from anything. You know, I was planning to float this board because he doesn't have much on average. So betting now really, for the same reason, really doesn't accomplish a whole lot. So I just check it back. And I river another 10, which is pretty cool. So now I have a lock hand. And so for the same reason in the last hand, I'm just gonna bet and just hope that he has something he can call me with. I don't really think he has much. I don't think he's gonna call very often. And I don't really think betting 100 here is really gonna do a whole lot for me. I think he's gonna fold. I think Barney is either gonna bluff catch me or he's not, and that's the end of it. So I'm just gonna try to make my bet look bluffy, and just hope he has something. And he does call me, which I was actually surprised to see. And let's see what he had here. He had 8s. Okay. That's exactly the kind of hand that I put in his range, and I guess he definitely could have checked the. I guess he could have check called the turn with that, but at the same time, I'm just calling myself lucky, and I guess he could have check called the turn there, but at the same time, I think pocket pairs are obviously a little smaller part of his range than a lot of his whiffed 3-betting range. So that's exactly why we have to bet the river, though, because he can make that hero call with those things, and that's exactly why I think we don't bet like 100, because if he's gonna call 100, I think this particular opponent is gonna call 240, and he doesn't have to call a whole lot more often. Like, he doesn't have to call very often at all for 240 to be a better, more profitable bet size. So I was just throwing that, and it just capitalizes on my image better. So I was just throwing a note on there about how that just went down. It was kind of a good pot. We got a little momentum back. He had definitely won a few, so it's good to rip some momentum from him. So it's important to think, like, in this video and in the next one, I definitely catch a few turns and rivers. And it's really important I just bluffed that turn just because I thought I could, and he checked and called. Now the nuts are on the board, so just check. And he had a 10, so that's unfortunate for him. But what I was saying is, when you do things like float out of position or, float the flop, and then you get there, people don't, your opponent really gets stuck on the fact that you sucked out. He doesn't really think about your strategy, and he doesn't really tend to think, oh, this guy was floating me, and he got there. Okay, that's just how it goes. They just think, like, what a fish. He called the flop with Jack high, and he hit his. He called the flop with Jack 10 as undercards, and he hit his 10. What a fish. So that's kind of how people approach it. So it's definitely important to keep that in mind, because they do tend to get frustrated in that spot, and they're like, how do you make that play and then hit your hand? It's like, well, they don't even consider the fact that I was floating them, because, quite frankly, they are opening themselves up to a very profitable play when I do float them, because they don't play as well in the turn the river as maybe they could. Anyway, so that's that. All right, so I check call the flop, which I think is good. I think a check raise would be an option as well because frankly I expect Barney to not give my check raise a whole lot of credit. I expect him to call me the 9 and clubs for sure, and worst kings. But I just kind of wanted to take a little more passive line here, largely because I've been using the out of position float a little bit, and I'm gonna keep using it because he's been fighting back at my aggression, like when I check raise and when I bet. So I'm just using this to set up. I'm using this as a spot to set up a kind of set up my range so I can use the out of position float. So he sees me play a hand this strong in this fashion, and then I'm basically just balancing my range here because I need to start working in this play a little bit more because like my donk bets and my check raises haven't had a whole lot of respect, and as a result, that would make this a good hand to check raise too. But I just at this point in the match decided just to go a little different direction with it so I could improve my range down the road. Now the turn of the river don't work out real well, but there's not a whole lot I can do here. But let's think about this. The 9 is definitely in his range on the flop. It's in his range on the turn. So is every king. So are clubs. But he didn't bet the turn. He checked it back. So he doesn't have a flush. And we know for a fact that if he had the ace high, if he had an ace or the queen of clubs, he would bet the turn because he always semi bluffs his flushes, his flush draws for one street. He always semi bluffs. So then he checks. So we can expect him to have done that on the turn, but he didn't. So I can't put a flush in his range here. I just can't. I don't think he ever has a flush. So let's think about what else he could be betting on this river. He could have a 9, but is he going to value bet a 9 on a 4-club board? Probably not. What about a king? I think it's kind of the same thing. I think he's going to check back. So, and I'm definitely not giving him credit for turning a 9 into a bluff here. No way. He could maybe turn a hand like king 8 no club into a bluff, possibly. But I beat that. So any made hand he's turning into a bluff, I beat. He doesn't have a flush, so I'm bluffing. He's bluffing here, like 100% of the time, and I think my hand's like always good. So as you can see, I called him pretty quick, and he had Jack 4. So it worked out well. But as you can see, he's bluffing, and notice his bluff was full pot. We haven't really seen him bet full. We haven't really seen him value bet the full pot bet size much. So that's a really important piece of information. Now, right, okay, so let's check this hand. So he 3-bets, I call. Oh, just what I was going to say. I don't think he is thinking through his bluffs particularly well. And what I mean by that, he's not representing his bluffs in a believable fashion over the course of the entire hand. He's pretty much, he'll find himself in like what he thinks is a good bluff spot on like the turn of the river, like if there's a 4 straight or a 4 flush, and then he just bets big. And it's like, well, yeah, that might be scary for one street, but when you think about it over the course of 3 streets, each time he's done it, it's just made no sense, and I've picked it off each time. The one time I 3-bet him when he bluff raised me on a 4 spade board, and then this because he's not putting a story together for me. So, fortunately, that's he hasn't caught on to that yet, and hopefully he'll keep doing it. All right, so he 3-bets, I call, and usually when he checks after 3-betting, he's just giving up. So that's my primary concern there. I assume right there he had like Broadway cards and whiffed. But he almost, whenever he checks, like he check folds like a huge percent of the time after he 3-bets. So I'm starting to get my stack back a little bit here. And he 3-bets me again. The biggest reason I'm still just min raising almost everything is just because he 3-bets so much. I just don't want to fold to his 3-bets. And when I play it pre-flop like this, I don't have to. And the reason I don't want to fold is just because, I've been I've been just ripping medium-sized pot after medium-sized pot from him after he 3-bets me. I can play these manageable pot sizes that are easy to take down. So, interesting spot. He is now about half pot, and I have a flush draw. I've turned a flush draw. I think it's, I think when he double barrels, I think he has something a lot. He just hasn't really double barreled me in these 3-bet pots. He plays them very straightforward. So I think he's got something. I think he may have turned a queen. I think that's the most likely. I think maybe he has something like a 6. Maybe diamonds. I think diamonds would be the bottom of his range here. He could even have 2 pair. I mean, I think he's 3-betting 3, 4, 4, 5 for sure. So at this point, I definitely think he has something. I definitely don't consider my 5 to be the best hand. So I basically have to decide whether I'm going to fold, call, or raise. And I decided to just jam on. I just called. Excuse me. I thought I saw myself click the shove button. I just called him. I really don't think. I'm glad he didn't shove because I don't think that's the play. And he definitely, I think, is calling a lot. So when he double barrels there. So I just call him. I think my king is going to give me the best hand. I think a 5 is probably going to give me the best hand. And I think, obviously, a flush will. And I could probably even bluff a 2 or a 6. So a queen shows up. A queen shows up and he thinks about it and checks. I think this is a really tough spot. I can't remember what I do here actually, but before I see what happens here, let's talk about our options. We can check it back, and I think we're going to be good some percent of the time. I don't think we have the best hand all that often, considering the line he took. Nonetheless, he obviously doesn't have a queen anymore, so we can take that out of his range. I don't think he has a set. We can take that out. And so that really restricts the amount of... And obviously he doesn't have a boat. So that really restricts his range now. His range now is a whole lot more narrow than it was when he double-barreled the turn. So just because he's never going to check a queen, a boat, or a straight. So I think that as a result, we're talking about like a 5, which I beat, a pocket pair, which I'm not even sure he would double barrel, and missed draws. So I think we're ahead of enough of that range actually that we can just check this back. But I would not fault someone for bluffing here either. But I think I just think our hand is too strong to bluff here. I think if we had like 4, 6, we could turn that into a bluff. Or even like, Jack 4 somehow. Something like that. Or maybe even 5, 6. But I think King 5 here is a little too strong to bluff. Yeah, so I just check it back. And he did flop the straight, which I can't believe he checked the river with. I thought that was very surprising and very telling. But most of all, he only bet half pot, which we had a lot. The stacks were deep, and he only bet half pot on the turn with that, and that's a monster. That's a monster. So he definitely let me off the hook there. The bottom line is he has the best hand on the river so often. Like, why is he checking? Is he trying to check raise me? I mean, I kind of doubt it. Or is he checking just because the board paired and I could have a boat? I mean, that's like very rare. Plus, if I had a set on the flop, I would have played it faster. So I never have a boat here unless I have like queen 4 or queen 5, which is like very few combos. So I really don't like that river check. But it's really, really important for us. It's a great piece of information because not only is it telling us how polarized his river betting range is, but we also picked up on the turn that his value bet size is half pot. So if he keeps betting pot at us, and also remember he bet pot when he bluffed us a few hands ago in that flush board. So it seems like now his we have a bet size tell. Half pot equals value, full pot equals bluff. So, and he's polarized on the river. So we're going to keep that in mind. But one thing that's important is you always want to be paying close attention. Even though we're 240 hands in, we're still picking up information left and right. So that's one thing that's great about long heads up matches is it just gives you so much time. Well, you just have so many opportunities to gather information, and it assuming you can focus for this long, which is a legitimate challenge. It definitely is for me anyway. Um, Theoretically, your edge is just going to grow as the match progresses, assuming you can still play pretty well. So I'm going to pop up King Queen. And it comes down dry, but like you guys know how often he's folding to my C bets here. So obviously I'm going to C bet. He just doesn't mess around in 3-bet pots. It's fantastic. That's a rarity online in online heads up. So I just check this one back. Remember the board's paired. He loves to check raise these, etc. So again, I don't really see. I decided to go for some cute value here, trying to get him to call me down with like king high, which he's done in the past. But he check raises me, and now I've kind of put myself in that spot where is he check raising me because he has a hand, or is he check raising me because I min bet? And I really don't like putting myself in that spot. I didn't really think he would check raise me there, although I think I probably should have thought so, but I got a little too caught up on trying to get some cute value. So I rivered my ace, and honestly, I don't see a point in this bet. I'm not sure it accomplishes anything. I think that he thinks I might bluff it. I mean, what am I going to get value from here? Honestly, I can't come up with anything really. So I don't like the bet. I should have checked back. And he has a flush. I mean, yeah, like the bet does nothing for me. I think his turn. I think if anything, we picked up some info on the turn. He's willing to check raise the turn with a flush draw when he thinks I'm weak. But that needed to be that definitely needed to be a check back. I feel like I've played actually very well, minus 1 or 2 hands until this point. That's a mistake. Fortunately, it was a small one. I do make bigger mistakes than that throughout the match. So I think the next 2 are going to be, you're going to see more mistakes from me just because the match plays real long. And this is like the first really long heads up match I've played in a few months. I just haven't been getting a ton of heads up action, so I've just been playing a lot of 6-max where people don't have a choice who they play against. And so as a result, I just haven't gotten a lot of action. So I've just been definitely haven't gotten action for 800 hands at a time. So it definitely the length definitely wore on me a little bit. So it was a challenge for me to maintain my A game throughout this whole thing. And I feel like I did. I give myself probably B plus. Probably B plus. That sounds about right. Just because there's definitely some 20. There were a couple of 20-minute stretches where I didn't think I played that great. So nothing too exciting going on. I am at this point. I'm trying to tighten up my image a little bit, just because he clearly has no respect for me, and as a result, I want to not only improve the quality of cards I'm playing on average to make sure that my edge there is big, but I also kind of need to. I think I can just fold the 9-5 here. Yeah. So I also kind of need to gain some more credibility at the same time for when I am bluffing. Because the bottom line is I'm going to be bluffing more than I'm value betting because this is heads up. And it's more important that my bluffs work than that I get value for my big hands. So I'm definitely trying to tighten up a little bit and try to restore my image a tad. Not too much, but it's definitely something I'm thinking about at this point in the match. All right, so he leads out into me. So he doesn't check raise, and he leads out. Now, this is interesting because he just check raised the flush draw. So I got to think if he has a flush draw here, he's going to check raise the flop. But he doesn't. So I can take out a lot of flushes. I'm not saying he can't have a flush, but I don't think he has one very often. Now, I also think that, remember, when he's donked into the turn on us, we've raised him in the past and he's folded. So, but we have a pretty good hand here. So I think we can just call him down. I'm not sure a raise really does a whole lot for us. I think he's just going to fold worse and call better. So another diamond comes off. And he checks, of course, because he's bluffing a lot. So I think I just check this one back. I don't expect him to ever really fold a diamond, but I don't really think he ever has a diamond. And I don't know if he'd play a jack this way either. So I just check it back. And he does. He shows up with the ace, which I thought was really interesting. So basically, and that's definitely in his range too, by the way. You know, that's something I failed to mention a minute ago. You know, remember how we just talked about a minute ago how he always semi-bluffs his flush draws. And there we go, right there. He bet half pot on the turn as a semi-bluff and then didn't follow through. So basically, he checks a lot of rivers to me because he thinks I'm going to bluff him a lot. And he's losing a lot of value. And I definitely think he could pick up his, you know, and without a position, his river value betting thing, his river value betting range. But I guess he's going for like the big, massive river check raise. But fortunately, I haven't really walked into one yet. So more confirmation that he semi-bluffs his flush draws. And, yeah. So I think the checking back there is good. Not just because he had the ace, just because I'm not going to get value from worse. Okay, so bunch of folding. As you can see, I'm trying to be tight right now. And pick up a gut shot with our overcards. Pretty good spot. And obviously here, if he check raises, you know, I can call. At this point, I'm pretty much not. I'm not really c-betting a whole lot of hands that can't handle a check raise, just because he's check raising me so much. So I check back, and I'm checking back because I don't expect him to fold a pair, let alone a draw. And there are a ton of those combos in his range. So I think that the play is either just to check it back, and I have the best hand here, like, sometimes. So when he has, you know, like 9 queen or something. So he checks the river, and now I'm not like, I think I can definitely bluff this. I definitely think he could have a hand like 5-7, 6-5, 6-9, 7-9. A lot of those like bottom or second pair hands with a draw. I think I can get a lot of those off. I think the jack is a pretty good card for my range, and I think that I can use it to get him off like one of his crappy one pair hands. So I fire 80. I fired 80 instead of full pot because when he bluffs full pot, so I thought he associates a full pot bet with a bluff. And all of my bluffs have been about the 3/4 mark, so I brought it down to 3/4, and he folded pretty fast. So, and we just know he peels the flop real light too. I mean, he could have had ace high there. I just didn't think I had enough showdown value to check it back, so I just bluffed it. You saw me just randomly throw in a full pot raise pre-flop. I hadn't done it a whole lot, and I just need to get one in there. Really no other reason. I'm probably min-raising 70% of my hands. 70% of my hands at this point. So I'm not three betting like you guys might notice I'm only three betting like 12%, which might seem kind of crazy considering how much he folds my C bets and three bet pots. But I feel like at the same time I want to have something. Like I don't think I want to do it with just like 6-3. I want to have something that can flop a draw, even flop like a middle pair. I like to still be a little bit selective, and I've been getting a pretty crappy selection of hands in the big blind lately, last 50 hands or so. So I'm just kind of waiting them out, and I'm using it as an opportunity to solidify my image a little bit, and that works out fine too. So at the same time, I think my image got to a point where I think I was, well, I haven't seen him adjust yet, and I don't like giving him. I'm not gonna say that I think he is about ready to start battling for three bet pots because I haven't seen it yet, so I don't think it may never happen. So the primary reason, my point is the primary reason I'm not c betting crappy hands just to take it away on the flop. Excuse me, three betting crappy hands just to take the flop away. It's just for that reason. I just want some sort of backup plan, something that can potentially flop something halfway decent. All right, so I just checked this back because this hand fits solidly into something that I don't really want to be check raised with. If I had like queen 10, I would definitely just bet. But I turned my flush draw and decided to just crank this up now. I have so much equity even against a king and it's really good for my range to be able to. It's really good for my game plan to be able to check back and then raise with something decent because then I can do it as a bluff, and it'll also discourage him from firing there too. So you see me, I thought about donking out here, leading out, but I guess I just changed my mind. I didn't think he was going to go for it. He hasn't really respected my leads in a while. So I decided to check raise instead because I really haven't check raised him in a while, and this board is just so dry. And I went for full pot here because he's going to fold it without an ace. I mean, period. And when you're playing 78% of your hands, you don't have an ace very often. So I get myself into a tough spot here now where the top card, the ace pairs, which I think is just going to reduce my fold equity on everything. If like a king showed up, I would probably barrel. Not only because I would have picked up a gutter, but also because I think that it's something I can credibly represent even if I was bluffing. Whereas, and it would put another overcard to the board if he has like a 7 or like pocket 8s or something. So now the other ace rolls off, and now it's even less believable that I have one, and that's a problem. So it's just going to solidify his calling range when he has an ace, and it's going to solidify his calling range when he has like really any other made hand. So I think I just have less fold equity now than I did in the flop. So I'm just going to check. And he checks back, which is of course interesting. I mean, he could check back like an ace-5 maybe, but he could also check back anything else, including a 7. So this is a legitimately tough spot. Like, I still just don't think he's going to be folding a pair to me at this point. I just really don't. I just think it'd be a bad bet. He could definitely have an ace. He's never going to fold a 7, so I just check it. I just don't think this would be a very good bluff. Because I'm not quite ready to put him on like a pure float with like Jack 10 when I check raise. I just haven't check raised him a whole lot lately, and I have been tight the last 20 hands or so. So I'm not ready to put him on that. And he's got kings, which is essentially the same hand as pocket 8s. And I'd be very surprised if I was able to push him off of that. I think it would have required a triple barrel, and I think that's just suicide to be triple barreling a board like that. Because they can just call you down and you have no information. So he's relieved, and he's typing in "few" in the chat box, which makes me think that like I've got him kind of stressed out here, which is cool. So when he says "few," it's like he's legitimately concerned about what I've got, and then he's really relieved. So I hope he's stressed out. Maybe he is. It's hard to tell, but it's a possibility. So he three bets, and I tell him nice hand, of course. I'm trying to be a nice guy. I want him to play me as long as possible. Okay, so he checks it. I bet for value, obviously. Yes, Barney, you are only beating a bluff, and he just folds. What I'm not about to tell him is that I didn't think I would be able to push him off of a pair, so I would have been bad to bet there. So I'm just gonna fold that. Ace two off out of position is just terrible, especially deep stacked. So here's a spot where I'm just gonna bet, and if I'm check raised, I'm just gonna fold because I have 7 high with no really only two backdoor draws. So here's kind of another spot, and obviously it's tough considering it's a paired board, and we all know what happens on paired boards. So I decided to just c-bet, or because I'm tired of checking these back, and I do want to show him that I am going to keep betting, and he just does check raise, so that's okay. Not the end of the world. If anything else, you know, it's good to... It's good because now we know that he hasn't stopped doing that. Okay, so the 6-9. So as you can see, kind of a slow little stretch. So all I'm really thinking about at this point is I'm just trying to use this run of bad cards to just try to tighten up my image. You've seen my VPIP come down a few points during this stretch, and just trying to play real snug right now. The other advantage is that it'll give him a false sense of security, that maybe he actually is pushing me around, and that's always good. I mean, when he thinks that he's now in control of the match, but I know he really isn't, then you know that's an excellent situation. So I'm going to call the 9-7, make, you know, kind of a loose call just because I have been so tight lately. And I decided to lead out at him. And if I raise, that's okay. Not a big deal. We'll call. So here's one of those spots where I think he's going to check back too many hands. So I just need to keep betting. And the ace is a good card. Is a pretty good card for, you know, the ace of clubs. I mean, is a pretty good card for me. I could have been semi bluffing. I could have had like, you know, ace 5, ace 6, or something like that. So as you can see, I contemplate a 4-bet, and I decide the queen 5 suited is just a little too marginal, considering he's never going to fold to my 4-bet, and I don't really want to have to play a massive pot with this hand with these stacks. So I just call him and go to my normal plan. You know, it seems like when he bets he's often bet pretty fast when he has it, and these are boards that do hit his range pretty hard. So I've just been giving him a little bit of credit in these 3-bet pots. I haven't floated in the last couple times. They just haven't felt like really great opportunities to do it. when he leads out real fast for a c-bet, I just don't really feel like I feel like I'm going to get barreled a little more often. So, and then at the same time, when I don't think it's a good spot to float him, I can just snap fold and just, again, kind of reinforce all the things that I've been reinforcing. That, you know, that let him think he's taking control of the match, that sort of thing. And then when I do decide to bluff, I expect to have a lot more fold equity. So I make a pot open, no particular reason. And I bet here. I decide if I get check raised, I can just call, because I think he'll check raise, like a big diamond, and he calls pretty loosely. And the other thing is, we know he check raises like a pretty wide range, like any piece, and most draws. So when he just checks and calls, I think he's got a lot of real marginal stuff, like maybe gut shots, ace highs, that sort of thing. So I just decided to double barrel him, and that's pretty much a bluff there. I mean, it's possible he had a better hand, but I mean, I'm mostly just bluffing. I'm trying to get him off of pretty much whatever he has. I just think he's weak, and if he wants to call me, I mean, that's fine. I'll just check back the river, but mostly I just think he's weak, and I want to take the pot. Is pretty much my thought process there. I'm really not too concerned about my third pair on a board like that. I'm just trying to get the pot. So I decided to float him here. I got backdoor straight draws and a backdoor flush draw and my overcard. I actually have two backdoor straight draws. The 3-4 and then the 10 king. So I got a lot of backdoor equity, and I got my overcard. And then I think he'll check back the turn a lot because that's what he does. So I also think I have a decent chance of getting my ace high to showdown. So now I just need to fold. He does double barrel me. So I've been pot opening a little bit more lately, so I decided to do it with my strong hand as well. I kind of want to get a sense of whether or not he was willing to make a pot 3-bet with these stacks, because if he isn't, then I'm going to start pot opening a lot. Now, I check back the flop, I think for all the reasons I've been checking back the flop in the past. I have a marginal hand with showdown value, and didn't really want to get check raised. So I turn my ace, and I just pot it, I think. Oh, no, I go for 30. This bet size is designed just to try to get value from a queen or a king. He just folds. So I think one key thing to think about in a long heads-up match is when you do go through stretches like this, it's now been 40 or 50 hands without really a big pot or a decent starting hand. We had the ace-king, but he folded. So let's see what happens here real fast. So here I decide to, I think I'd call here. Simply because his board is dry. I think my king high has a lot of equity, and I definitely think he could be like semi-bluffing here. I think he could just be flat out bluffing here. We know that when he leads the turn, he's either usually semi-bluffing or he'll snap fold if I raise him. So I don't think I can raise him here because I didn't bet the flop, and I would have bet the flop if I had a 6. So I don't really think I can pull off a raise. And so I just call. I think my king high has a lot of equity here. So I just check it back. And yeah, he has 7-10. So I was correct. So as I was saying, I think that, well, let's see what I have a hand here. I'm definitely going to call. I think a tougher spot would have been if you'd bet that river. I still think I can call, although if he potted it, I think I could call, but if he bet less than pot, I think I can just fold the king high. So I decided to lead into him because he doesn't like being led into, but unfortunately here he just snap folds. And in retrospect, I wish I had check raised, but that's okay. So we'll play ace-4 suited. Flop well. And I decided to lead into him again just because I just led into him a second ago. I think I have the best hand. I think he'll, float me or, well, call. I mean, instead of float, let's say he'll call me like a 5 or a pocket pair, a flush draw. And he probably doesn't want to be led into, 2 out of 3 hands. So I just lead into him here. If he calls me, if he raises, fine, no problem, we'll call. So as I was saying, when you go through long stretches like this, it's not really a big pot or anything like that. Really, not a whole lot to do. Just think of it as an opportunity to manage your image, but definitely don't get impatient and start feeling like you have to bluff all these hands or turn all these hands into bluffs or run a bunch of crazy moves. I mean, that can be that can be a good thing to do against the right opponent, but don't default to that. Think about where your image is, how much credit your opponent is giving you, and then just kind of use the slow running cards to do whatever you think you can do. And if that involves some folding and conceding a bunch of small pots, that's okay. So I think that hand was pretty standard. I was trying to give him a chance to do something because I have the best hand so much, and then I just bet the river hoping he had something, and he just folded. I think I should just check back here. I'm sure I'm about to get check raised. Yep, there it is. I think that was a little sloppy. So I decided to float the check raise. And he checks it to me. I haven't done a whole lot of floating on the paired boards with the check against his check raise. But this is just getting ridiculous. He check raises every single paired board. And there's obviously he doesn't have it every time. And it's just, I think it's sloppy on his part too. I think it's kind of ridiculous, frankly. So he calls me. So now this is kind of interesting. What does he just call there with? Wouldn't he have, if he was checking, wouldn't he have check raised if he had an 8? If he really had an 8, wouldn't he have check raised again? Or if he had a straight, wouldn't he have check raised the turn? So he just checks and calls. So what is he worried about? Does he have 8 deuce and he thinks I have him out kicked? Or does he have a 6? So this is kind of interesting. I don't think he has an 8 anymore because he gets all passive. He check raises and then check calls. Wouldn't he have either check raised the turn again or led the turn if he had an 8? It just makes no sense to me. So now I'm thinking I probably have the best hand when I river my queen. But if he has a 6, I don't know if he's going to call a bet. I don't know if he's getting passive with an 8. It's hard to tell. I think he has a lot of error. Error is the first thought that comes to my mind when he check raises every paired board. So obviously, betting against his air doesn't do a whole lot, and I don't really think he's going to call me with a 6, especially when that queen shows up. Because when I bet the turn, I could maybe have Jack 10 or something, or 10-7. I don't know. I don't know exactly what he's thinking, but I don't think it's a whole lot of value here at this point. I do check back, and my pair of queens takes it. So a good river, and this I'm very interested to see what he had at this point. And he had a 6. So ace 6. I just think that's... And he types in 3 exclamation marks with the nice hand. I can only assume that's sarcastic. And... Right, so it's just I don't know how I feel about that. What does his check raise really accomplish with that hand? How is check raising better than check calling in a pot limit game with these stacks? I think it's fine against a really aggressive opponent who you're never going to show your 6 down against. I think it's fine to turn it into a bluff. But he's obviously trying to show the hand down because he didn't bluff the turn. He check called it. So I don't think that's what he's trying to do. But is it for value? I mean, he's building this huge pot with a very marginal hand out of position. Because he's never going to know what bad turn or river cards are. So I don't really understand the thought process there, to be honest with you. I know I don't particularly like it. I know I wouldn't play the hand that way with these stacks against an aggressive opponent, but anyway, that's my take on that. Okay, so we get check raise, I call. Excuse me, we get 3-bet, I call, and he leads. So I thought this board just misses him completely, and obviously he is c-betting like 65% after 3-betting, so it's not like he's only doing it when he hits. And this board is very dry. So I decided to make a move here. I think I could definitely just call, but I thought it'd be a good spot to get a bluff raise in. And you can see me debating between calling and bluff raising. Let's see what I think. I think the pros for bluff raising would be that it can help me balance when I actually do pick something up in this situation. The cons are that he very well might not fold, and all of his pocket pairs are overpairs, which he's never going to fold. So that's a big problem. And ultimately, I think that's why I decided to I think I just call. Oh, I folded. Okay. I know I didn't raise because of the overpair thing, but I think I could float here. The problem with my float was that I knew I wouldn't be representing a whole lot, and I decided to just fold there. In hindsight, I think a float would have been good too. They're all decent options. I think that I just won a pretty big pot from him, and I really wasn't looking to let him take one off of me, simply because when you do that, it kind of untilts them and they start to feel better real fast. And I want him to still be he's still irritated over that queen 3 suck out, and I want that irritation to last because it's going to affect his game. And he wouldn't have typed 3 exclamation points in the chat box if he wasn't irritated. So I want that irritation to last, and that's ultimately why I folded. It was more for metagame than for hand ranges and optimal strategy. I definitely think folding, calling, and raising folding and calling are close. I think raising's a little bit worse. But when it's close, I try to think of some other variables that might be in play that will allow me to push the decision to one side or the other. Okay, so he 3-bets, of course. So I think this is a pretty good board to mess with him on. It's going to scare him with 3 clubs. Not to mention he has a lot of non-ace king hands in his range. So, and he did check, huge piece of information there. So I decided to just, of course, bluff. And he's thinking. Now at this point, I'm thinking I'm probably about to get check raised, considering he never thinks this long before folding, ever. So he's either going to call or check raise me. I don't think he's going to fold anymore. So now it's kind of interesting. I think I need to bet here again, keep the pressure on him, because I don't think he's not checking and calling an ace. He's not going to check and call the queen of clubs. So I kind of think he has like a king. And that's it. Like a king, no club. Because remember, he semi-bluffs his flush draws. So I think he has like a king, no club, maybe like pocket tens. Something like that. Maybe he's pot controlling an ace, maybe, but I don't think he would have thought that long. I think the timing tell there is interesting. He went into the tank for it. So at that point, I think his hands are real marginal. So I'm definitely think betting is the play, and that is what I end up doing. And I check it back. That I don't like. I don't really like that at all, actually. I think my thinking was that he wasn't going to fold any hand that had a club in it. Like, king 8 with the 8 of clubs or something. And then the jack definitely, I thought, helped his range a little bit. Maybe like king jack, pocket jacks. Ultimately, I really don't agree with this decision. I know at the time, I do know at the time, I also thought that I can still win the pot on the river. And when I check back, I'm representing showdown value. And I think those are good points, and I do think I can win this on the river a lot. But at the same time, man, I think you just got to bet there. I think his range is just so weak that you just got to bet that turn. So he checks again, and oh, the other thing, I know that I thought I had showdown value when I turn my jack. I definitely am beating a lot of his like pocket pairs that have clubs in them, that kind of thing. I don't think that's that big a consideration though. I think he has enough kings in his range that betting is still a. I think bluffing is more important than trying to show this down. So what am I doing here? Why am I sizing 130? I'm really debating between checking and betting. The ace definitely screws me up now. The ace is a bad card because it's like in that last hand. He's not going to believe I have an ace as much because he knows that combo-wise I have fewer ace combos. And then he's also going to think, why didn't I bet the ace on the turn? And that's a legitimate point. So now I'm torn between what can I credibly represent and versus how much showdown value do I have. And this is actually kind of a tough spot. I think right now, the way this hand went down, I think I have to check back because I don't think he's going to fold a king. And yeah, that is what I do. So I like the turn play. Excuse me, I like the river play. I don't like the turn. I think it needs to be. I think it needs to be bet. See, like, look at that. That's what he called me with. And I mean, it's. I think that's very. I think it's obviously at the bottom of his range, but let's think about when he has a club to go with that. Then are we better off checking or betting? And in that spot, we'd be better off betting because he's going to fold because he'll probably fold it. But when we check back, we let him realize his flush draw equity, not to mention his set equity. Where if he's just going to fold, then we can get him off of it. Not to mention if we can get him off of a king ever, then I think we definitely need to be betting too. So that's the spot where I kind of think we ran well because we ran into the bottom of his range there. I think that turn was a mistake, not to bluff though. And he's saying good grief because I sucked out again. It's like, well, Barry, if you don't want to get sucked out on in that fashion, don't check call sevens there because you're going to get sucked out on a ton. It's the bottom line. I mean, he's caught up in the fact that he made a good flop call, but it's like you really didn't. Like I hate his flop call just because he had the best hand at the time. It really is absolutely irrelevant because he's never going to be able to show that hand down against an aggressive player who is going to bluff on the turn of the river. He's never going to get to showdown, and the times he does, he's going to end up in very hard spots where he has no idea if I'm bluffing or if I'm value betting. And on a board like that, I could very easily be doing both. So he's gonna set himself up. He's gonna put himself in situations to make a lot of mistakes and big ones. So, I'm not a fan of that flop call at all. Of the flop line, the check call on the flop with that, I think is just. The minute I saw a student of mine do that, I would try to correct that immediately. So this hand went check, 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 so I'm just going to pot the river and hope for the best, and he did fold. Generally, when he shows no interest in a pot, generally it's just mine to have. So actually, this is kind of. I think you can kind of go both ways with this one. Call or fold. Calling's more of a bluff than for value, obviously. So this looks like a board Barney might want to bluff at me with, which I'm not surprised. It's paired. So I float him. I have the best hand here a lot, and I really don't think that. Sorry about that. I was seeing if the 25K heads up PLO tournament was about to go, and I saw Isildur was playing, and like everybody else in online poker, I'm glued to what's happening with Isildur today. So that was why that table showed up. All right, so I check back. I think it's self-explanatory. Betting does nothing for me, and I'm ahead of a lot of his range. And the reason I don't, I'm not worried about bigger ace highs because I'm going to be chopping with. If he has a better ace high, I'm going to be chopping with all of them. Um, well, that's not true. I just don't think that. I think his range is wide enough that I win here enough. And he has jacks, which is like kind of wow. I guess it's not that bad. If I were him, I think he can bet the river. To be honest, like, why would I not bet a queen or a seven on the turn? What could I possibly have? Yeah, so if I were him, I would bet like half pot on the river for sure. But it just seems to me like very often he gets caught up on his hand relative to the board, and I just don't. I mean, I feel like I'm thinking through his ranges a lot better than he's thinking through mine. So I definitely am, not looking to quit him. I'm not gonna. I mean, I'm not gonna be the one who quits this match. Is what I'm thinking at this point. I'm just gonna play him until I can't keep my eyes open or until he quits me. Just 'cause I think a hand like that really says a lot. I think when he doesn't value bet that river, I really think that I really think that he's just pretty focused on what he's got, and he knows that he has a pair of jacks on a queen 7-7 board. Whereas he knows I'm floating him a lot. I guess he's maybe trying to get me to bluff, but I haven't really been bluffing a whole lot when I check back the turn. I haven't really done that at all, actually. So, that's one more piece of the puzzle that I'm not really sure he's putting together in terms of my game plan and some of the moves that I've made. So I definitely feel good about my edge here. So I decided to turn this hand into a bluff, and I think you could definitely be value betting like a 7 here. You could definitely be value betting. You could be bluffing a lot, but I like this bluff because he could be value betting. He could be semi bluffing like clubs. I like this bluff because my hand's just not that strong. And it's the kind of situation where a lot of river cards can come, like a lot of river cards can come, and I'm gonna have to fold if he bets, or you know, he could check and I could check back, and he could have still gotten there and I'll have no idea whether I should bluff at it or not. So I like just bluffing right here. The 5 might save me. I think a 4 is probably gonna be good, but I don't have a lot of outs, and I just think no matter what he has pretty good equity against me. So I just decided to take that away from him and try to win the pot right here. But he calls me real fast. So at this point, I don't think I'm going to try to bluff again. I think that he'll snap call me with like 8-9, a 5, and clubs, and probably a 7. I just don't think I think I'm gonna get him off all of his misdraws, and he'll call me with all of his pairs. So yeah, he had a 5. Just happened to have a 4 to go with it. So I just check back at that point and we chop it. So we'll pump up the ace jack. Let me take it down. Ace 7 suited. Pretty little hand. And he checks it. And I'm actually kind of unsure. I'm kind of unsure of some of these flop decisions, considering how often I'm getting check raised. But I just kind of default to the, I have the ace high. It's the best hand a lot type logic, and I think that's good. I decided to bluff here. I decided to bluff that turn just because, when he doesn't bet there, I think he has nothing. And I decided just to use it to win a pot, just to keep my turn betting range strong. So I'm not value betting there. I am bluffing. but I'm really trying to keep my aggression up, and checking that hand all the way down is not how I really want to do it. I mean, I'll definitely win the pot a lot when I check it down, but I'm just kind of thinking about some other things right now. Okay, so he 3 bets, I call. He checks, I bet. This is all 100% standard with everything else going on in this match. He checks and calls. So remember what he had last time he took this line. He had pocket sevens, no flush draw on an ace king 3 mono board. And so I can't put him on a jack. I can't really put him on an 8. I guess he could have an 8. He could also have a bunch of other garbage. So when the king shows up, I think it's a really good card for me to bet. And I still have, even if he calls me, I still have my gut shot to fall back on. But I think betting here is mandatory, considering that we know he's weak when he takes this line after 3-betting. So I go ahead and bet 230 into 300. And this one took me by surprise. He makes a huge check raise, you know, almost a shove. And obviously now I'm just gonna get the hell away from this. But I think, you know, at this point now I'm like, all right, you know, maybe Barney's thinking a little bit about what happened in the last few hands, and he knows that I know the last time he took that flop line he was really weak. So this time he's doing it with a big hand, and you know, got to give him some respect for that. Right now and going forward, that he's put the recent history together to take advantage of me, and just got to say nice hand. Just got to say nice hand to that one. So he wins a pretty good pot there. So standard. I pot raise. He calls. He's check raising. The board's paired, of course. I planned on calling here, just because I think my ace is gonna be good a lot, and I have my 10. So, and I do hit my 10, which is a little gift. So I proceed to bet. There are not a lot of full houses he can have here, but there are, like, he has like almost every king in his range. So I will play this for stacks. And he calls. So now I'm trying to think about how many kings he has versus jacks. We know very well he could check raise a jack. So we know obviously there are more jacks in his range than kings. So I think that I got to pick a size that is going to get action from both of them. I think he's always going to call the king, no question there. I think he's going to call most of his jacks. I just don't think he believes me after, he took me off of that double barrel in the last hand. So I don't think he's going to give me a whole lot of credit. But I'm not, if I bet like 7, if I bet pot, it's going to be half his stack. And I think he's going to be a little hesitant to put in that much with any jack. So I picked 450. I thought it was a pretty good size. It's almost, well, it's like maybe 55-60%. It's pretty consistent with what I've gotten in the past, and what I've bet in the past is a bluff, sort of. And I think it's the amount he can call with his whole range. He says no. I'm almost, which makes me, confirms to me he has a jack. The other thing to keep in mind before we see his hand about that bet size is that he didn't barrel the turn. So I don't think he has, so we have to discount the king somewhat because he checked and called the turn. I just want to get that out there. So that's why we have to really put a lot more jacks in his range than the king, because he didn't follow up on that check raise. So he has a jack like a ton. So we got to make sure we bet an amount he can call. Okay, just wanted to add that. I think that's an important piece of hand reading. So then he pays me off, and now I'm just hoping he gets furious over the fact that he did have a king. He had king 4, which I was surprised he played a king that slow. I mean, you have trips heads up. I mean, who doesn't try to stack off with any trips heads up? So I just think it kind of confirms that, like, he's taking these showdown-based lines with, like, a hand like that big. If I were him, I would have just been pounding right there. But maybe he doesn't know with his image and the way this match is going, he can't get away with that there. Because I'm not going to pay off 3 streets. I mean, I would have with my ace-queen, but that was like the top of my range. If I had a jack there, I'm not going to pay off 3 streets against him. So maybe he just knows his image, and he has a pretty good idea of what my read is on him. So I just got to kind of assume that's it. So I'm sure he's not happy about that gut shot. And this is like a great situation because now I flop big like the very next hand. And usually after people lose a big pot, they're not in the mood to fold. He says, "You ever miss?" And so I decided just to check raise him to try to build this pot up and try to get him just to think that I'm, full of it, just trying to bully him. But he turbo folds, so that's okay. Can't do much about that. So I'm just trying to play the role of the lucky nice guy. I rarely talk trash. It's just not who I am. But so I'm just trying to be amiable and hope that maybe if I'm nice and it's a pleasant exchange, then he's more likely to stick around and play me, which I generally find to be. He says, "I guess that's beach justice." I like that. that was a pretty good line from Barney. That is the taste of beach justice, Barney. So, the question here is, do we bet or check? I think that betting would have been fine. In fact, I think I would have preferred it. I think he would have bet an 8 on the flop. Yeah, I think I should have bet there. That's all there is to it. Or, excuse me, no, I checked and called there. So, I take that back. I misread that action. He checked and called, so he very well could have an 8 here. It's definitely in his range. He is barreling. So I decide, what do I do here? I think folding is fine. I can't call again. I can only raise or fold. Now, considering the last 2 hands, I hit a gut shot, and then I check raise the flop when I had trips. I'm not sure Barney is going to give me a lot of credit here. Although he might, because he's still smarting over that gut shot. So I just don't know how much credit he's going to give me. I can represent Nate here very well. And I really do think I'm going to fold him off of any pair. And I do think he's frustrated to the point where he could just double barrel here without an 8. So I think you add all that up, and I think it's a plus EV spot for sure. I think I'm gonna take him off at almost his whole range other than an 8. And the downside is that he may not be in the mood to fold, an overpair or 6-7 or something like that. But I do think that I think it's a good bluff. And we're keeping like max pressure on him. I mean, put yourself in his spot after the last 2 hands when this happens. I mean, that is going to frustrate him for sure. And that is not something that is worthless by any means. So he's thinking. And he calls. So now I'm in a tough spot, and this is one problem with this line is I'm in a really tough spot because I have no idea what he has. And do I shove here? Do I give up? And I just give up pretty fast. Honestly, if I'm going to take this line, I think I need to shove. Because why wouldn't he shove? I could see him just calling with a straight. I could also see him shoving. I think he's going to shove some part of the time maybe. But I think I need to shove here. And because he will peel me light for 1 bet. And he has done it traditionally. And then he'll give up. So I think I have to shove. And I kind of, at the time, and this was a mistake of mine at the time, I didn't fully think through the river when I made the bet. I kind of thought he would fold and that would be it. I didn't think through what I was going to do on the river if he called. And so as a result, now the river's here and I'm unprepared. And this is bad place to be. You want to avoid the situation, and you need to think this through before you make the raise on the turn. So I don't know what to do. I haven't thought this through yet, and if I take forever and bluff, I know it's a huge problem. So I either need to fire quickly or give up. And I checked pretty fast, and he bets half pot, which is interesting. Obviously, I'm not doing anything with this. And yeah, so he shows me the eights, both of them. But I think that I think overall the hand's fine. I mean, even with a plan, I'm going to check fold there a lot. But I think that the other huge downside is handing this guy a double up right after that one huge pot I won would be very unfortunate as well. I think in hindsight, I really just don't mind a fold on the turn, simply because he just doesn't double barrel that often. Like, he doesn't double barrel scary boards really without a hand. And I think so. I was just a little too focused on ripping another pot from him instead of really thinking through his double barreling range and what sort of textures he does it on. But it's a lot. There's just so many things to think about. It can be definitely in heads up. There's just so many considerations. It can definitely be tough to give the appropriate weight to each thing. I think in that one hand, though, I think the biggest piece of information is that he double barreled a scary board. And he just doesn't do that. Remember, because we just talked about how he is, I think he's a little too caught up on his hand in relation to the board. So that just makes me think he's not going to really double barrel without a hand. So I 3-bet here, just as kind of a light 3-bet. King 7 suited is a good one to do it with, just because I know he's calling with a lot of like suited connectors, and if he has another 7, I'm going to dominate him. And I got my flush draw. So I fire out, assuming he's going to fold. But he raises me. So, I mean, there's only one move here. Nothing I can do there. It's the first time he's raised me in that spot. And a super dry board, so I just decided to bet it. I expect him to fold there a lot. He doesn't really mess around as much on the ace-high boards. He does a lot more folding on the ace-high. On the dry, like ace-high, king-high boards, he tends to fold a little bit more. I don't think anything too exciting happens in this hand. Okay, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and hit me up with any questions, of course, as always, and we will get to part 4 very soon. I'll talk to you guys then.